Hey there, you doers. If you have an undermount sink, I think it's important that you watch this video. So a couple years ago, I was sitting eating at my kitchen counter, and I suddenly heard this noise to my right. It was like almost like a crashing noise, but not quite that loud, but something like, it was a strange sound I'd never heard before. I looked to my right and I noticed there's a sink looked off. And what I realized was the sink had actually dropped. The sink had sunk, and there was a gap now. I could see into the cabinet all around. And it was barely hanging on, so I quickly went underneath the sink and tried to hold up the sink. And the sink was full of plates, and it was heavy. And nobody else was at home to help me. And luckily I was able to reach across between the fridge and grab a two-step stool. And I shoved it under the sink and hold it up. And I'll put up a picture of that. And I'm telling you, it was tiring, and that sink was heavy. And had I not been able to do that, the sink may have fallen even further. So I was able to block it and lock it in. So it gave me time then to figure out what had happened. And what I realized happened is that it got separated from the clips that hold the sink up, and some of the clips are gone. So that made me realize all that was holding up my sink were these clips and maybe the sealant that was going around it. But what was evident was that there are these clips that go around that went around my sink that are simply epoxied onto the bottom of your countertop, usually put in initially when you're putting in the countertop. You flip the countertop over, you mount these clips, actually these mounts here, right here, these copper looking mounts with epoxy, and once they're all hardened, you then put this clip through the bolt, and then you secure it down against your undermount sink lip with this butterfly locking nut. And so you have a number of these, one on each corner, and then a few along the edges, maybe, I don't know, 4 perhaps. And that's what holds up your sink, along with some of the sealant. And yours may be different, but this is how mine was done, and as I did more research, how a lot of people are done. In fact, some people don't even have these, they just have sealant that goes around, and that's what's been holding up their sink, or maybe what's holding up your sink. And then other folks have these, instead of these like copper flat adhesion points, they actually have them screwed into their countertop. So that might be a little better. But anyways, say there's about 8 of these along your perimeter of your sink. What I realized is there's a lot of weight on this, and we'll talk about that in a second. But once one of these gives in, it then distributes the weight to the other ones. And so then it's sort of like a vicious cycle where one breaks and puts weight on all the other ones, and then that causes the next one to break, and then the next one, and then eventually your sink collapses. And so that's what happened to me. I was able to hold it back up. But why I want you to listen to how I solve my issues, because I don't want this to happen to you. Because fixing your sink, if it falls out, if it sinks, if it literally sinks and falls out after it's already mounted, is difficult. It's one thing to flip it over and put the sink initially in, but once it's sunk down, once it's broken out down, refastening is a little more difficult. And there's videos on YouTube about how to do that, and maybe I'll cover that a little bit. But the primary thing I want to talk about here is what to do to prevent this from happening to you, because I don't want this happening to you, because in fixing the sink took a lot of time. So I did it myself, remounted it myself with some help. But one thing you have to do is you have to clean all this silicone sealant out from under here to get good adhesion when you put the new silicone out. And I can tell you that takes a while in and of itself, and you're dealing with scraping with a knife or other scraper, which takes a lot of time. So right there, it's going to take a lot of time just to fix it. So what happened? So there's a lot of weight on your sink. It may look like stainless steel and it's all solid and looking great, but imagine you being one of these clips and you holding up the weight of this sink. So the sink itself may not be that heavy, but add dishes. So for example, these 5 dishes right here, I mean, these are pretty hefty dishes, but imagine I only had these 5 dishes. When I weigh these dishes, and I put them on the scale right here, and I put them on the scale, they weigh approximately 8 pounds, okay? So they weigh approximately 8 pounds, a little more, 8 pounds, 2.5 ounces. So now, that's not too bad. So that's not too bad, right? 8 pounds. Imagine holding up those 8 pounds continuously. So now let's be more realistic. You're gonna have more than 5 dishes in your sink, probably, and you're gonna have other things, pots and pans that you then fill with water. And water weighs about 8 pounds per gallon. So some sinks can hold 8 gallons of water. For example, let's just say you only have 1 gallon of water. Maybe you have a pot in your sink and it's full of water for some reason. You're soaking dishes and you have a gallon of water in there, and that weighs 8 pounds. So now you've got 8 pounds of dishes, 8 pounds of water, that's 16 pounds. But that's not all. Something attached to your sink at the bottom, underneath the sink, which most people have in their kitchen, is a garbage disposal. And if you have a standard garbage disposal, that probably weighs, I'm guessing, around 13 to 18 pounds. But for this purpose, let's say it weighs 16 pounds or 15 pounds. And so now we have 8 pounds of plates, 8 pounds of water, and then 15 pounds of weight from the garbage disposal. So now you're already at 31 pounds. You know, so now this could be, you know, the average weight that your sink is suspending using these clips and the sealant all the time, or the majority of the time. That's like the weight of this 30-pound kettlebell being held up by this sink all the time. In addition, sometimes when you're scrubbing your dishes, you might be pushing down on the bottom of the sink as you clean a particularly dirty pan, you know, that has some eggs or something else stuck on the bottom, and that puts pressure on the sink itself as well, on the clips. So now imagine adding even more water. Like, so every gallon is 8 pounds. So you only have a jug of milk, right? You know what it's like to carry a jug of milk. That's probably about 8 pounds as well. So think about that as you fill your sink up, how much pressure your sink is under. So the first thing I would want you to do is look under your sink, right? Look underneath your sink, go underneath your counter, just be careful with a flashlight, and look how it's being held up. It's probably being held up with sealant, and then see if you have these clips, right? And at least that's better than not having these clips that are holding up. And I bet that's what you have holding up your sink. Again, I don't want this happening to you. I don't want your sink collapsing on you. So I ended up fixing my sink. I had to remount everything, of course. I had to pull up the sink, and so basically what I did was I cleaned this all off. Took me a long time. I took off the garbage disposal, pulled this up. I had someone help me pull it up and hold it up till we got a good seal, and then I put some support systems underneath. There's something called the third hand that I purchased that I used to help hold up the sink while this was sealing. So I made sure that was good, and that was a solid seal. And then I fixed some of the clips that were under there as well that I could reach. So I fixed the clips, I put the sealant on, and that was good. But this was not going to happen to me again. I personally can't believe this is all that was holding up my sink, that was holding up 30 pounds of weight, and probably more in some cases. So what I did was I went online and I purchased support arms for my sink. Here's a small version of the support arm. The ones I mounted are longer. This is for the end of the sink, which I didn't put on. But basically what you do is you take this right here like this, and you push it against the lip of the sink underneath your sink, underneath your counter. So go underneath your counter when it's relatively loose, okay? You can put this, you push this against the lip of your sink, okay? So now it's putting pressure on the sink like that, right? And this is going against the wall. then you simply draw a line with a pencil about where you want it, because you got some play, and you then screw it into the wall of your cabinet with 4 screws. You know, when you're doing that, just make sure you know what's behind the cabinets, because sometimes cabinets aren't that thick, right? And so, one, you want to make sure that your cabinet walls are solid. But also look at the thickness, because the screws may go through and go into maybe another sliding drawer or something that may interfere with that. So just be cognizant of that. I didn't have any issues with it, but just be mindful, you know, there's no electricity, etc. back there, you know, as well, right? Just be mindful where you're screwing stuff in. If you're uncomfortable, get a professional to do it. And then once it's in, so say it's supporting the sink like that, there's a bolt down here, a tightening bolt, adjusting bolt, which comes with an Allen wrench, and you just tighten this, and as you tighten it, what happens is there's a bolt inside, and it pushes up against the bottom here of the bottom of the arm, and then it tightens it up, and it pushes again against the top into your lip. And you have there's 4 long ones that I put in, 2 on each side, and then they give you this one as well, which you can put in the front or the back to support the sink as well. So in my mind, I would not wait until your sink fails on you. It may never fail. But I've experienced the failure, and also when I did my own research, I've heard other people having this failure. Some people mention after 4 years or something like that, and to me that's just not acceptable when it can be prevented. So these cost me about, I believe, a little over $30, maybe $35 for one set, and they were easy to put in. You can do it yourself if you want. If you need a professional, you can call someone to do it as well. But I fundamentally was able to do it myself. You know, thankfully there's a lot of information out there on how to use these. But I recommend that you look under your sink and how it's mounted. And if you want to look in getting some of these undermount mounts, there's also other support systems, like table leg kind of things that you can underneath the sink as well to support it like that. But that takes up room when you're trying to put stuff underneath your sink, and so I prefer this. It's much more cleaner. You don't really see them, and they're pretty strong, right? And so again, you doers, you know, I don't want you to waste your time for something that's easily preventable. Maybe it'll take you, if your sink hasn't sunk and it's still in good shape like this, and you're gonna just do it after you receive them, it may take you half an hour to put them in. But it's well worth it. I think, you know, it costs maybe 35 bucks. I'll put a link to what I actually purchased. There's another version that's a wider one, so you only need 2. But I went with the one with the 4 pieces that are spread out. And so I hope this helps you and prevents your sink from falling out. You know, it's better when things don't happen, you know, that you prevent things from happening than having to deal with it. So your sink needs help from getting sunk. It's holding a lot of weight. Again, 5 dishes plus the weight of the garbage disposal and the water, close to 30 pounds easily. Think about that. Think about getting one of these, getting these put in, and, you know, let's get things done. You know, spend your time doing things that matter. All right, you doers, please like and subscribe, support the channel. I just want to bring things to help get things done and share with you my own learnings.